You and I know how bitter the mornings get at Chicago O'Hare. At the first-class gate, wealth bought the usual polished icy silence that ignores the world. Past the massive glass windows, light snow drifted across the tarmac. Inside, harsh lights glared off pristine marble and the cold, golden accents of every desk. Elite passengers waited quietly, wrapped in expensive cashmere coats and sharp custom suits. Their expensive luggage stood beside them like small monuments to their success. Everyone in this elite crowd played their part in a transactional, silent routine, a quiet game of proving they deserved elite treatment. Adelaide Monroe stepped quietly into this cold, status-driven scene, completely ignored. At 76, she was frail and gentle, her silver hair tied back simply, showing a vulnerability that superficial people dismiss. Her simple wool coat had clearly braved decades of bitter winter weather. She wore a plain long skirt and gentle leather shoes worn completely smooth. She rolled a single, heavily battered suitcase close behind her. It was deeply scratched, its edges worn down by endless miles. Her only treasure was the simple gold wedding band on her finger. Holding a first-class ticket, she stepped quietly into the priority lane, looking exactly like a sweet grandmother traveling to see her family. Gate agent Corbin Vale spotted her right away. At 43, he ran the premium boarding area with cold and unquestioned authority. Every seam on his crisp blue uniform was pressed to sharp perfection. His dark hair was slicked straight back, rigid and glossy. He offered a plastic corporate smile that never reached his cold eyes. We know his kind, someone who measures a person's value solely by outward wealth. Sizing up gentle Adelaide took him only a fraction of a second. He targeted her faded coat, he stared at her worn back. Looking at her, he saw someone of no use to him, lacking any elite status. His cold judgment was instantly locked. Stepping directly in front of her, he offered that fake transactional smile. "Ma'am," he announced loudly, "this boarding zone is strictly for premium travelers. I am quite sure you wandered into the wrong lane." Adelaide stopped. She was not shocked, just deeply, quietly tired. Reaching into her heavy coat, she calmly pulled out her ticket and held it up. "I am in the right line," she answered with quiet grace. "This is my boarding pass, and this is my assigned seat." But Corbin refused to scan her ticket or even check the screen behind him. Holding the paper like trash, he stared at it as if she'd forged it. He scoffed loudly, wanting the wealthy crowd to witness his harsh treatment. "Where did you get this, ma'am? Did someone else buy this for you? Are you sure you didn't take another passenger's ticket by mistake?" Watch how the surrounding crowd chose to react. A man in a sharp blazer whispered a cruel joke, making his partner laugh at her. An older woman clutched her luxury purse closer, treating this gentle grandmother like a threat. Farther back, one lone passenger watched this cruel treatment without any amusement. His name was Archie Whitman, a good man. Let us look at 71-year-old Archie, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn, mended coat with quiet dignity. Time had turned his thick hair completely silver. His steady gray-blue eyes never looked away when he saw the weak being mistreated. Hard work left his hands rough and calloused. Scars on his fingers told stories of 40 years fixing airplane engines. He had no fortune, yet pilots trusted this honest soul with their very lives. Younger mechanics called him Sir out of pure unforced respect. He knew exactly how an engine hummed when it ran with true honest power. And he could instantly spot when something was wrong. Grief struck early when his wife died, leaving him with 5-year-old Callista. From that dark day, Archie stepped up to be both mother and father. He quickly mastered braiding hair and cooking breakfast at 4 in the morning. He sat by his sick child, offering comfort with endless patience. He watched through long nights, then worked long shifts without complaining once. He skipped buying a winter jacket so his daughter could have school books. Callista grew up sharp, driven, and eager to succeed. At 27, she ran a major Chicago aviation company as executive. She wore expensive silk hidden under a perfectly tailored designer blazer. Her flashy gold watch was worth more than her father's beat-up truck. She deeply loved her father. Yet wealth made her chase social status, blinding her to true character. She cringed whenever he spoke with plain, unvarnished honesty. She felt ashamed when he brought his worn-out jacket to elegant corporate dinners. Buying him a luxury first-class ticket was meant to be a grand gesture. She wanted him to see the elite world she had worked into. She never realized his silent, stubborn integrity would face a test there. You and I have seen this. When trouble started at the gate, Archie watched in silence. Finally, he leaned close to his daughter to speak. "Do you see what is happening up there?" Callista was too busy checking emails on her luxury phone. She looked up, dismissed the struggle, and lowered her voice. "It is just a routine ticket check, Dad. Let us not get involved." Archie remained completely silent. He looked at her, saddened that she only cared when there was something to gain. But he did not judge her. Seeing that helpless stranger tremble over a cheap ticket, he remembered the core of real kindness. A simple, profound truth he shared with her years ago. He warned her that ignoring those who can offer you nothing is the ultimate moral failure. If she only showed kindness for profit, he had failed as her father. The smug gate agent kept holding her ticket with lazy disdain, treating her as if she were a criminal trying to steal a seat. You and I know he could have easily verified her reservation on his screen. Confirming her booking would have taken 3 seconds. Instead, he chose to publicly humiliate a helpless stranger. "Ma'am," he sneered, "first-class tickets are usually bought through verified accounts. Do you have ID? Did somebody buy this for you?" Adelaide quietly opened the worn leather wallet she carried. Her hand shook, yet she offered her license with gentle politeness. She softly explained her name was Adelaide, and she bought it herself. She was traveling to New York, adding that today was a deeply special day. It marked the 50th anniversary of her marriage to her late husband. Decades ago, he made her a beautiful promise that one day he would take her first class to New York to walk by her side, right through Central Park as the winter snow fell. But he passed away before keeping that promise. So she was taking this journey alone, carrying the worn suitcase they shared through their entire lives. In a kinder, gentler world, this heartbreaking story would have stopped any decent person cold. But Corbin saw zero benefit in helping her, dismissing her grief as a minor inconvenience while flashing a slow, utterly fake smile. "Ma'am," he announced loudly to the whole queue, "I am deeply sorry for your loss. But a sad story does not prove you belong in the first-class cabin." His heartless words struck her like a physical slap. Adelaide winced, barely visibly. A nearby passenger chuckled, then quickly slapped a hand over her own mouth. Behind her, a businessman sighed loudly, showing zero patience for the delay. Corbin loved the attention. You and I know bullies mistake silence for true approval. He claimed the airline had a strict duty to protect their premium guests' experience. He insisted he was merely doing his job. He threw around corporate rules to justify himself. In seconds, he trapped a powerless lady who could offer him nothing in return. Callista stood watching, and her neutral look finally crumbled. She hated the arrogant tone the agent was using. It carried the same cold, corporate formality. A cold tactic she used herself when firing people quietly to avoid a public scene. She recognized the cruel game. Deep down, a heavy guilt began twisting into something painful. But she spotted an important passenger waiting right behind her. He was the top financial executive of a massive fund she had chased for 9 long months. She calculated her moves like a leader who always put profit before people. She knew that stepping forward right now meant everyone on board would carry that awkward scene straight into their high-stakes New York meeting. Then Archie stepped out of line. He did not rush, and he never raised his voice. He walked with quiet dignity, showing us that defending the vulnerable requires real, selfless strength. He stepped past the other travelers, past the velvet rope, past Callista's stunned stare, standing squarely beside the helpless old woman. He stood close, offering a quiet protective shield so a total stranger wouldn't feel completely alone. He faced the agent. "Corbin Vale, she has a ticket," he said gently. "Your job is only to check her ticket. It is not to judge her worth by her worn coat." You and I know that heavy silence. The entire gate froze. The prideful agent slowly turned around. He eyed Archie's plain brown coat, scuffed leather shoes, and cheap cloth bag sizing him up. That arrogant smirk returned to his face, colder and meaner now. "Sir," he sneered, "are you traveling first class as well?" "I am," Archie answered calmly. "But even if I weren't, I still have every right to demand you treat a vulnerable elder with simple respect." Several embarrassed passengers, waiting in the queue quietly cast their eyes downward. A young woman stepped beside the old lady, realizing true kindness means standing up for the vulnerable when no one else will. But the gate agent refused to yield. He mumbled defensive excuses about exclusive service and stopping potential ticket fraud, claiming regular people could never understand the pressure of his duties. He hid behind empty words, but Archie only watched him dig a deeper hole. When the agent finally paused, Archie spoke up, keeping his words simple. "No," he said, "you are just defending your own fragile pride." That quiet truth instantly cut through the tense air of the terminal. Embarrassed onlookers turned their gaze away. A man slowly lowered his filming phone. The impatient businessman who kept sighing constantly suddenly pretended to read the upside-down newspaper he had clutched for the past 5 minutes. Callista quickly stepped forward. She grabbed her father's arm, whispering softly to hide her sudden quiet panic from others. "Dad, please," she whispered. "We are literally about to board. Please do not make this any more of a public scene." Archie did not shrug off his daughter's tight grip. He just looked at his daughter's face, holding no resentment toward her. He asked softly, "Should I be quiet because I am wrong, or because standing up for a stranger makes you uncomfortable?" Callista could not offer an answer. Deep down, beneath her designer dress and fancy title, she knew her father was completely right about basic human decency. She was just too afraid. Adelaide watched them with the knowing eyes of someone who had survived a lifetime of being dismissed. She looked gently at Archie. Her fragile voice was barely louder than a whisper. "You do not need to fight this battle on my behalf," she said. "You and I should remember," his response, just as everyone standing at that gate did. "I am not standing up for you based on your wealth or status," he said. "I do it because if I am ever the helpless one standing alone, I hope a kind stranger speaks up for me." The smug smirk on Corbin's face completely froze. He never expected to be taught a lesson in basic human dignity by someone wearing a cheap coat. His sudden public embarrassment quickly curdled into a cold, bitter resentment. "Stick with me here." He quickly began typing to search his screen. That smug look completely vanished the moment he read the name Whitman. Archie's name sat right next to the powerful CEO, Callista Whitman. The gate agent suddenly realized he was dealing with corporate royalty. His hostile attitude shifted completely right then and there. With a sharp breath, "Mr. Whitman," he warned, "if you keep disrupting my boarding process, I will have security step in and remove you." Callista paled, desperately wishing this moral test would just disappear quietly. The agent then turned to her. His voice softened into something polite but calculated. "Miss Whitman, I know you agree this premium experience must be protected. Your father seems to be getting a bit overwhelmed. I would hate for this drama to ruin your flight." It was a deeply calculated, strategic kind of cruelty. It completely trapped the successful daughter, forcing a choice between standing up for others or protecting her pristine image. Nearby passengers were already starting to recognize her. She heard her executive title muttered in quiet, judgmental whispers. Her face flushed hot. She truly wanted to protect her father from this insult. But she dreaded this ugly scene becoming the defining scandal of her career. Looking at her father, her voice came out much weaker than she intended. "Dad," she whispered, "I know you want to help. But we really do not know the whole story here." Archie looked at her with patience, but also deep, heavy disappointment. "I know enough, Callista," he said. "An innocent elderly woman is being publicly humiliated. That is the only thing that actually matters here." The agent pushed past them, turning his cold glare back to the elderly lady. He coldly ordered the fragile woman to step aside for extra screening. He delivered the blow in his most polite, professional airport voice. But the ugly truth underneath was instantly clear to everyone around them. He just wanted this helpless woman hidden away to save his own ego. Adelaide began shuffling away, but Archie gently stepped in to stop her. "You do not need to go anywhere, ma'am. Please, stay right here." He glared at the agent again. "If you must check her ticket, you can do it right here, right now, in 2 seconds flat. Why push her away?" The agent clamped his jaw shut, completely furious. "Let's pause here. This is where you and I see the bully lose all power." Adelaide pressed a trembling hand gently against her chest. The last bit of color was rapidly draining from her face. She gasped for air, Archie immediately turned to check on her. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Corbin's cold, clinical voice cut through the air. "Sir, she looks sick. She honestly should not be flying today." Archie slowly turned his fierce, burning gaze toward him. "You are just using her frailty to throw her aside," he snapped. "Do you even hear yourself? Now you and I are about to witness the ultimate test of character." Nearby, a woman in a black dress watched everything in complete silence. Let's look at Vanessa Hart. At only 28, she was already running a massive luxury brand spanning 5 major cities. Her hair was pulled back into a cold, flawless knot. She watched it all happen, seeing the agent aggressively snatch the ticket away. She saw rich passengers laugh while a helpless, frail woman stood there trembling. She stayed silent, hiding behind the cold detachment of her status-driven world. Then a father in a faded coat stood up, showing the grace she lacked. For the first time, she had to ask herself a hard question. In her world, people only mattered if they could offer you something valuable. Every door opened wide for the wealthy, but they slammed shut on the needy. But Archie's selfless defense shattered her comfortable, transactional worldview. The way he asked his daughter, "Do you want me silent because I am wrong? Or because this is awkward for you?" echoed endlessly in her mind. That heavy question was not just meant for his daughter. It challenged every bystander waiting in that crowded boarding line. Vanessa had wealth, she had status, she had a powerful voice. If she had stood up for this stranger, the agent would have retreated. This innocent woman would have been saved from such painful humiliation. Instead, she watched a 71-year-old father show the selfless, unconditional kindness her own worldly power utterly lacked. She finally took a tentative step forward. But before she could speak, Corbin dismissively waved his hand down the long corridor. 2 large security guards in dark uniforms rushed over to the gate. They marched straight toward the tense boarding gate. They arrived with the practiced cold calm of officers used to handling airport security disputes. They immediately looked directly at Corbin, because his uniform gave him the automatic authority of the company. The cruel agent quickly spun his story before anyone else could speak. He claimed the defenseless older passenger was holding an invalid ticket. He lied, telling them she stubbornly refused to step aside. He complained that another passenger had interfered with his work and was now completely halting the boarding process. He hid his real bias, never admitting he judged her looks. He hid behind cold words like irregularity, verification, and obstruction. You see, this professional jargon masked the deep prejudice he held inside. Adelaide tried to defend herself, pleading, "I have documents." "The ticket is mine. Please check the system." Corbin coldly interrupted. "Ma'am, we have heard enough. Please cooperate." Archie spoke up, addressing the older of the 2 guards. "Officer, please check the booking number before you humiliate a harmless older woman in front of this crowd. Do not let a foolish rush on your part leave a permanent stain on her life." The stern officer paused slightly. Archie's quiet decency pierced through him, exposing the hollow authority of the uniform. He turned to verify the system, but the panicked agent quickly cut in. "Officers, this flight is delayed. These wealthy passengers are starting to complain. And the blame falls on you if you don't remove her immediately." The crowd shifted, muttering with a cold, impatient indifference. Rich travelers openly whined, completely blind to the woman's struggle. We see the truth here. No one cared about her dignity, only their own time. Finally, Callista spoke up against the quiet cruelty. It was a small, hesitant step, but a genuine act of compassion when it mattered most. Her voice was soft, yet it pierced the cold room. "You could just check her ticket right here," she suggested. "Why force her out before you even verify it?" Corbin glared at her, his voice turning icy and sharp. "Mrs. Monroe, Mr. Whitman, do not let basic sympathy cloud your professional duties." In that moment, a chilling reality struck her heart. It cut deep into her very soul. He was using the same cold corporate excuses she did, the exact heartless logic she used in boardrooms to ignore her own sense of humanity. Cold, calculated, and strictly procedural. All about optics and risk. He mirrored the empty lies she had told herself to avoid helping a stranger in need. Adelaide turned to Archie, her voice sinking to a soft, gentle, fragile whisper. "Mr. Whitman, I hate to see you get into trouble just for defending me." Archie smiled warmly, showing her the basic human dignity everyone is owed. Ma'am, trouble does not start when we speak up. It starts when selfish hearts assume nobody will care. And right then, the entire atmosphere shifted. Sharp, heavy footsteps began echoing down the long hallway. The strides drew closer from the private hall of the elite lounge. Confident and completely in control, the sound of wealthy men rushing in a panic, desperate to preserve their fragile status. 3 serious men in expensive suits marched right over. The man leading them clutched a high-end leather briefcase. They completely ignored the arrogant manager, walking right past him as if he did not exist. They stopped right in front of Adelaide, and the lead attorney, a tall, distinguished gentleman with gray hair, offered her a deep, respectful bow. "Mrs. Monroe," he said clearly, "forgive our delay. The emergency board meeting is ready, precisely as you requested." A stunned, breathless silence choked the terminal, shocking the onlookers to their core. They were utterly paralyzed by their own bias. Realizing too late that judging someone based on what they can offer is a dangerous path, Corbin stood frozen in shock. "Mrs. Who?" The lawyer turned, finally seeing Corbin for the shallow, transactional person he was. His voice stayed completely calm. "Mrs. Adelaide Monroe," he declared, "founder of Monroe Capital Trust, the lead shareholder of North Star Airways, and the wealthiest woman in all of Chicago." Nobody in that line dared move. The young guy filming on his phone slowly lowered his hand. The passenger who had mocked her looked away in deep shame. The executive, hiding behind his paper, let it slip right through his fingers. Corbin turned pale as his arrogance crumbled, realizing that treating a seemingly useless stranger like dirt had just cost him everything. Callista just stood frozen in place. She stared up in awe at her father, who looked calmly back down. A quiet understanding passed between them, far deeper than any spoken words. He truly had no idea who she was. He simply saw someone who needed help, proving that true kindness seeks absolutely nothing in return. That is real character. Helping someone when there is absolutely nothing to gain. The lawyer continued speaking softly, cutting through the heavy silence of the terminal. He explained that Mrs. Monroe had chosen to travel entirely alone today, leaving her usual security and staff behind. This trip was deeply personal, a quiet journey of pure, silent remembrance. Her old coat was no sign of poverty. Her late husband bought it during their first winter in Chicago. Over 50 long years ago, that worn suitcase had traveled far, right by their side on their very first adventure as husband and wife. Let us be clear, she wasn't hiding money, she was carrying her beautiful marriage. Corbin judged her by her cover, completely blind to the priceless treasures she actually carried. Adelaide quietly reached out and took her boarding pass from his frozen hand. Her delicate fingers still trembled slightly, but no longer from any fear. Corbin began to stutter, desperately mumbling something about a simple misunderstanding. He babbled about strict procedures, but those corporate excuses meant nothing now. The whole crowd had just witnessed his cruel and arrogant behavior minutes earlier. He had claimed her struggles gave her no right to fly in first class. The quiet billionaire never raised her voice. She had never needed to shout during 50 years of running her empire. Facing Corbin, she spoke clearly for everyone to hear, without a single hint of petty anger. She carried herself with absolute, undeniable dignity. "You never truly questioned my ticket," she stated calmly. "You dismissed my humanity, simply because you thought I had nothing of value to offer you." Corbin bowed his head. "Mrs. Monroe, I am deeply sorry. I was only trying to protect the high standards of our first-class cabin." "Wrong," she replied quietly. "You used rules to justify your lack of basic decency." Suddenly, a high-ranking executive from North Star Airways rushed down the airport corridor toward the crowded gate. Arriving completely out of breath with 2 panicking assistants, he immediately begged for her forgiveness. "You and I have heard this before, the frantic script of corporate damage control." He frantically promised a full internal investigation. He promised her every courtesy now that he knew her status. Adelaide let him finish before calmly slicing right through his desperate excuses. "I do not want a bouquet of apologies," she said. "I want to know how many people without my wealth, my lawyer, or my airline shares have suffered the same exact mistreatment I faced today. Those sharp words instantly shifted the air in the quiet terminal. This was no longer just a predictable story about some wealthy traveler being insulted by an arrogant gate agent. You and I know this became about every traveler dismissed just for their worn coat, their age, or just looking exhausted from a long, grueling journey. She immediately ordered her lawyer to document the entire incident. She demanded they preserve the airport security footage right away. She wanted names of other dismissed passengers who had filed complaints about first-class discrimination over the last 5 years. Corbin was suspended on the spot right at the gate. They stripped his badge before the crowd he had so desperately tried to impress. Stripped of his petty authority, he slunk away, unable to look anyone in the eye. Suddenly, onlookers who had laughed scrambled to offer Adelaide their shallow, self-serving apologies. A wealthy man wearing a gold pin mumbled, "Madam, I am truly sorry. I should not have smiled." Adelaide just stared at him coolly. "Do not apologize to me just because I turned out to be wealthy," she said. "Save your apology for the next person you would have looked down on just because they seemed to lack money." The man stood there entirely speechless. Then Adelaide turned toward Archie. "Mr. Whitman," she said softly, "in this entire line of travelers, you alone acted like you grasp what true class means." Archie simply shook his head. "Ma'am, I only did what any decent person should do." She studied his gentle face with an expression of deep sorrow. "No," she replied gently. "If kindness were common, I would not have stood here alone for so long." With Corbin gone, the senior manager scurried off to make frantic phone calls. As the waiting passengers finally remembered they were supposed to be boarding their flight, the tense boarding area slowly began to breathe again. But not for young Callista. Let us watch carefully, because Callista's old, shallow self simply stopped breathing. A new, much wiser version of her took its first breath instead. She stood incredibly close to her decent father now. She no longer carried that arrogant, superficial chief executive energy. She just looked like a daughter, her defensive shoulders slumping slightly. Her eyes welled with tears, though she fought to keep from crying. "Dad," she whispered softly, "I am so sorry." Archie turned to his child, holding absolutely no anger in his heart. "What for?" he asked, though we both know he already understood. "For being afraid you would embarrass me," she finally confessed. "For judging her by her cover instead of just seeing her humanity. Let us look at where real decency lies." Archie never lectured his daughter during those 22 years. He simply reached out to gently adjust the collar of her jacket, remembering how he fixed her school uniform when she was 6 and still struggled to tie her own shoes. "I raised you to walk tall in those crowded rooms," he said. "But I hope you still notice the forgotten souls being pushed into the shadows and treat them with dignity." Callista could not find the words to answer him. She could only nod in agreement. A solitary tear slipped down her cheek. She had spent her whole career hiding vulnerability, so she brushed it away. Holding onto her father's arm, she anchored herself to his quiet strength. Vanessa approached, her expensive heels clicking softly against the polished airport floor. She stopped right in front of Adelaide first. "Mrs. Monroe," she said, "I am deeply sorry I saw what happened. And even though I could have spoken up, I chose to remain silent." Adelaide quietly studied her eyes. She said nothing for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but cut right to the truth. "Status means nothing," she said. "Choosing silence only makes you complicit in the cruelty." Vanessa absorbed this truth, nodding in shame. Then she turned to look at the family. She promised her brand would spearhead a campaign to end prejudice in the travel industry. She pledged to share her own mistakes to help spark real, honest change. Callista stepped forward, wanting to do her own part. Her company would launch a dedicated transit service to protect vulnerable, elderly travelers, especially low-income patients in need. This was for desperate families facing emergencies who could never afford sudden, steep flight costs. She did not say this to gain praise. She spoke because witnessing real, unconditional kindness made it impossible for her to remain a passive bystander. Adelaide never asked for these public vows. But you and I know that recognizing our failures can spark genuine transformation. Archie looked at his daughter with the same pure pride he felt on her first day of school. He smiled a warm, quiet smile. For a moment, she was not some wealthy executive. He just saw the little girl who once gave half her lunch to a hungry classmate, kindness offered with absolutely zero expectation of reward. When boarding resumed, Adelaide invited Archie to take the first-class seat right next to her. Callista took the seat right across the aisle. None of those wealthy passengers dared to look at Adelaide with the same arrogant contempt they showed earlier. She did not look back at them. She just walked through the gate in her worn coat, quietly pulling her old suitcase with absolute grace. You see, she had not suddenly changed into someone else. They finally saw her, learning that true kindness expects absolutely nothing in return. You and I know that once the cabin doors shut and those massive engines began their slow rumble, Adelaide turned to the man who defended her, speaking very softly. She quietly opened up about her late husband. She explained how broke they were back then, literally splitting one cheap cup of coffee at a tiny cafe near the train station. Playfully arguing over who got to drink that very last sip, she remembered how he used to look at her and promise, one day, "My love, I will fly you first class straight to New York." To him, that luxury seat was never about flaunting wealth or drinking expensive wine. It simply meant the day his wife could finally rest. The day she would finally find true respect, getting the dignity she deserved, instead of being treated like she was invisible. Archie listened in silence, his rough hands folded, watching snowdrift past that small oval window. He understood her pain deeply, far more than any wealthy passenger in that cabin. He had spent his own life chasing that very same dream for his daughter. He wanted to ensure she would never have to feel small or powerless again. Callista leaned across the aisle. She reached out and gently squeezed his wrist. "Dad," she whispered, "I wanted to show you my world of luxury and status. But today you showed me what real human kindness actually looks like." Archie smiled warmly. "You never have to be the richest person in the room, sweetheart," he said. "Just protect your heart from ever going broke." Let us look at what followed, because true kindness always forces a change in the world. Every single luxury employee was forced to retrain on stopping discrimination based on age, appearance, social class, and physical disability. They even set up a direct helpline for vulnerable travelers. And that superficial gate agent, he was fired, blocked permanently from working any premium hospitality jobs. Records exposed his habit of mistreating anyone who could not offer him any benefit. But the story of unconditional kindness spread through the society the way genuine moments always do. Discussed during family dinners and retirees calling up their grown kids. Neighbors even talked about it over backyard fences. Because true kindness does not care about wealth or massive fortunes. And it was not about punishing Corbin. It was the sight of Archie, a 71-year-old father wearing a simple brown coat, standing up for a helpless stranger, long before knowing she had any wealth or power to offer him. Callista honored every single promise she made back at that departure gate. Her company launched the new assistance program in less than 90 days. The very first flight they funded carried an 80-year-old veteran traveling to meet his great-grandson for the very first time. Vanessa Hart kept her promise as well. She used her massive platform to campaign against passenger discrimination in luxury travel. Right in her first press release, she noted that the frail woman was not the only one whose character was tested that day. We both know true kindness expects nothing in return. Weeks later, Callista drove her aging father back to his humble home in the Chicago suburbs. A quiet, forgiving winter snow had started to fall again. She guided him up the walkway, holding his worn-out bag. And for once, she felt no shame about his simple, unassuming look. She finally saw his true value, a lifetime of treating people with quiet grace. At the front door, she wrapped her arms around her frail father, holding on tight. "I am so sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I forgot how to value human beings the way you taught me to." Archie gently smoothed her hair with his rough hand, just like when she was a helpless little girl. "If you forget, sweetheart," he whispered, "you simply learn again. Real character isn't about being perfect or never making a mistake. A truly worthy soul aches when they cause pain to the vulnerable." Meanwhile, far away in a quiet high-rise New York penthouse, Adelaide Monroe stood by the glass, watching snow gather on her expensive terrace railing. She tenderly draped her late husband's threadbare coat over a nearby empty chair. just as she had arranged it for decades now. Tonight she did not feel like some invisible old woman dismissed by the world. She felt her humble, unassuming presence had been deeply honored. You and I know money buys a ticket, but dignity, true compassion and human kindness cannot be charged to any card. The richest person alive is never the one hoarding the most cash. It is the one who protects a vulnerable stranger standing defenseless in a cold marble corridor. A hallway packed with staring strangers on the hardest morning of her life. On that chaotic morning at Chicago O'Hare, Archie did not buy his first-class seat with money. He proved that our real value is revealed by how we treat those with nothing to offer. Not because of their wealth, but because they refuse to ignore those who seem completely powerless. They will not let a quiet elderly soul stand completely alone. And for us in a world that easily forgets, that quiet kindness reveals our worth far better than any boarding pass.